Uh, all right, and we're live on
Hello.
Facebook and YouTube.
Hi, everybody.
Homer Simpson.
Okay, that's strange.
If you're gonna say hi everybody, you got to start off with a Dr. Nick.
Yeah, that was the point. I would have also accepted, hi, Dr. Issues.
All right, we're gonna we'll get started momentarily. Just looking at the notes, making sure we've got everything squared away. And let me tweet this out. All right, let me just get the YouTube link. All right. We got really good engagement last time, so I'm hoping that last week with the Mojo episode, so I'm hoping that get good feedback this time around. All right, and I'm recording in Audition.
As am I.
All right, in 3, 2, 1. Awesome. We got
Alrighty.
our ramp. And I got my show notes up.
Yep, I'm good.
All right. Let me just tweak. There we go. I want to be able to speak right into the microphone, but also have my show notes up. Janine, hey. Heyo. Heyo. All right. We got Janine and Matt.
Woohoo!
So it's already going to be good stuff. All right. Let's get started in 3, 2. Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 112. And there's a peaches and cream joke in there somewhere, but I'm going to leave it alone and say that this is the start of our Batman month, our month devoted entirely to the Dark Knight. And the reason for the special Batman month is because it is our 3rd anniversary. Our first episode, all about Eddie Brock, aka Venom, was released March 7th, 2018. Technically, it was released like 10:30 the night before, but that's because I didn't know then how to schedule a release for the following day. But we'll stick with the March 7th release date. So 3 years, 112 episodes, plus the additional stuff, Mental Health Avengers, and countless guest appearances on other podcasts. It's been a really amazing ride. And I know we talked a lot about that in our 100th episode, which was our sort of recap and thank you to the fans. But it still gets me excited thinking about the impact that we have, and the fact that so many shows I know that were around when we started aren't doing it anymore. I have an entire folder of promos for shows that we promoted at some point during our run, and they've shuttered for one reason or another, and we're still here.
Yep. For whatever reason, we are very stubborn.
I mean, I could tell you why I'm stubborn, but you're not my therapist, so.
That's right. That's right. But I am your
Dr.
best
Issues
friend.
is not your therapist. He's not your psychiatrist and does not have direct knowledge of your medical issues. So yeah, we're 3 years down. In fact, the day that we're recording this, February 20th, is the 3rd anniversary of starting our Twitter account, because I got that notification this morning when I logged in. So,
wow.
Well, we got to get ahead of the game a little bit before we actually release the episodes. That's how you're supposed to do it with social media. Anyway, this is the first episode of our Batman month, and we've got some really exciting stuff to come, some of which we'll tell you about at the end of the episode because the plans are locked in, and other stuff still working on it. So
yeah, I'll give you a hint though. It has to do with the Cape Crusader.
Oh, damn. See, I thought we were talking about the Dark Knight.
Oh, okay. No, we're definitely talking about the detective.
Oh. Well, shit. Okay, that ruins everything.
Sorry. We'll be sure to introduce the next episode about Bruce Wayne.
Yes. So, I mean, Batman as a character, there's a reason why we haven't done him to this point, because as a character over his 80 plus years, he has been in countless comic books and various forms of media, film, television, live action, animated, etc. And so it was always going to be a difficult task to try and encompass everything about Batman. But when Doc and I were talking about what we were going to do for 2021 and an interesting way to celebrate our 3rd anniversary, we said, well, there's 5 Wednesdays in this particular March. Why don't we do 5 episodes on Batman, and each of them covering a different facet of the character? Because I feel that that's the only real way we're going to be able to even scratch the surface of a character like Batman. I know even with these 5 episodes, we're not going to be able to hit everything, and I don't think we're going to be able to really do the character justice, but we're certainly going to try. And so we're starting off the month with this episode, which is about his relationships with other characters. Now, on the show, as you all know, we've done a number of the Robin characters. We've done several episodes on other members of the Bat family, and we have done numerous Batman rogues. And Ariel is probably responsible for about 80% of those. Shout out to Ariel for almost always picking a bad character. And yet, when we do those episodes, we tend to focus on the character as an individual. Yes, for some of the Robins and for Alfred, certainly, we talk about their relationship with Batman. But there are a number of characters that we haven't done that are also closely related to Bruce. And I feel like we can spend a good amount of time talking about those characters and the nature of their relationship with Bruce Wayne, because to be involved with Batman carries with it a certain amount of weight and responsibilities. And I think it's important for us to, when we talk about the individual characters, we want to give them the room to breathe because they are freestanding individuals. But I guess the sort of Damocles, almost, if you want to even call it that, is their relationship with Batman. So let's start, because like I said, we could spend 2 episodes talking about everybody and how they relate to Bruce. Batman and Commissioner Gordon is a very key relationship in the comics, and one that has been addressed in many different forms, particularly not just in the comics, but also in the various types of media. Gary Oldman in the Nolan trilogy, and the animated series. One of my personal favorite versions of the Batman Commissioner Gordon relationship is in the Harley Quinn series that was on the DC universe and is now on HBO Max, because it portrays Gordon as this neurotic man with like zero self-esteem who is always out to try and impress Batman, and thinks that if he could just get Batman to admit that they're best friends, that will just make his day. And it's this very needy character, and I love the way that Christopher Maloney plays him. But hello, thanks for joining.
Hi.
But Gordon gives Batman cover within the Gotham City Police Department. And I think that's very important because of the role that Batman plays within Gotham. He is outside the law. By the technical definition, he's the vigilante. And Bruce needs somebody to vouch for him in GCPD. Yeah. And that is not an easy thing to do, given all of the various, shall we say, extracurricular activities that Batman is known for. So that's a heavy burden on Jim. And it's a credit to their relationship that it hasn't frayed or it hasn't been destroyed over time.
Well, let's take a look at what the potential negative could be if this goes wrong. And I don't think you or I are naive to the idea of cronyism when it comes to situations that involve authority. The fact that those two have worked together so many times, they've developed this sense of trust that they're both seeking justice. And Commissioner Gordon, by definition, has to color within the lines. He has to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. To do that, and then on the side, to have someone who's working outside of those confines, but still respects him enough that he is willing to, let's just say, make sure that he doesn't put Gordon in such a dire position that there's no way it could continue. This could have gone wrong the very first time they really got to know each other. And the fact that it didn't shows an incredible amount of patience, which is the exact opposite of what you would think when you're dealing with supervillains and all sorts of concerns about mass violence in the city and all those other things. You mentioned that Gordon is giving Batman a cover. I'll tweak that a little bit. I would say Gordon is giving Batman a platform. He's actually allowing him to demonstrate that just because someone else does something a little different than what we're used to, that doesn't mean it can't have a positive effect. And he'd rather the results speak for themselves instead of trying to get into debates with people as to what's going on. That's a very bold way to approach the circumstance. Not everybody could really take that chance, be willing to put their career on the line for the sake of something like that. And yet that's the way he's handled it no matter what. I think that's incredibly impressive. Meanwhile, to flip it back to the Batman side, he doesn't get many chances to pick someone. A lot of people pick him. People are going to come after him. People are going to make him a target. And when it comes to the police, you got to figure they want that cowl on their mantle. So for the head of the police to not take that opportunity to put that feather in his cap at any point, that says a lot. And I know it's going to get into the second part of this discussion, but I'm not exactly sure someone who's decided all along that they are going to make sure they use intimidation in the fact that criminals are a suspicious and cowardly lot, that they would go ahead and use that formal platform and be comfortable doing it over and over again. Because although it's true, if a regular beat cop catches him, it's still a risk. But knowing that you have someone else even above them and you can say that I think we'll be able to work something out, that allows a lot of freedom in decision making, a lot of freedom in terms of just how much you're willing to put in the effort, knowing that someone like that has your back. So it's mutual for sure. And it's absolutely amazing over the years just how far that's gone. To tie it into our reality, when you have someone that is your, and I'm not using this as an insult, I'm saying if you've ever heard the term work spouse, that is something that you have to take incredibly serious. It means that you're tied at the hip with someone professionally, and you know that you're in it together and you're going to continue to make things work, because that's exactly what you do with those types of relationships.
I like the comparison to a work spouse. Having said that, I think it's a one-sided relationship in that respect from Gordon to Batman, because I don't think that Bruce views Jim like that. He trusts him. He absolutely trusts him, and we saw that, during Endgame when Batman died, and Jim was the one to take up the mantle among obviously many others. But I think it's much more from Jim's side that Jim considers Batman to be the work spouse. I think if Batman had to say somebody was his work spouse, it would be either Alfred or Dick.
Right. That's a great point. But I think that's true for many dynamics, in the sense that if you have a middle manager and then you have the VP and then you have the CEO and then like, all organizations have certain layers, and it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're on different layers doesn't mean that you can't have some level of mutual understanding. It's not even. I'm not claiming it's even. I'm just pointing out that it's that close knit. It's that tight.
Okay, that's totally fair. The next thing that we can discuss with respect to the Batman and Jim relationship is much more even-handed, in that both men provide the other with an honest ear. And I think that's why their relationship, even though it is based on that, there's a certain level of, I can't say distrust, but again, the idea that Batman is the vigilante, the fact that both of them are willing to say to the other, I think you're going too far in this. I know Jim is certainly willing to tell Bruce if he thinks he's stepping over a line, because that's his job. But concurrently, Bruce is also willing to say to Jim, I think GCPD is going too heavy-handed on this, or you're out of your league. I think that honesty and that trust is so vital to the relationship, and it's one of the reasons why, even though things may sour from time to time between them, it's never fully broken because of that honesty, and because they're willing to call the other one out if they think they're going too far. And we all need a friend like that.
Yeah,
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
No, that's a great point. There's always going to be a certain level of distance between the two, because for the most part, I'm going through the majority of the years. I know there have been hints otherwise, but the idea that Batman remains Batman to Commissioner Gordon, but he can think of himself however he wants to the other way. So whether it's Bruce thinking that way or Batman thinking that way, he can say that he knows fully well what their relationship is about. The fact that someone like Commissioner Gordon is willing to let that go. I mean, he has asked, he has kind of poked and prodded here and there, but they make sure it's not the crux of any of their discussions about, by the way, what's your identity, that sort of thing. And so the ability to keep that distance, but maintain that you have to have this person in your corner, that's unique. And often that can lead to the type of relationship where you're trading places in terms of feedback and mentorship even. So one of the best things you can have, and this may sound counterintuitive, is to have someone who doesn't quite think the way you do. You can often come to similar conclusions. You can have similar motivations and agree for the most part. But let's be honest. You can't tell me for a fact that someone of Jim Gordon's background and family life and et cetera, especially from a working class situation compared to the, I'm not saying this in terms of the privilege of it, but just the idea of Bruce Wayne growing up in Wayne Manor, having the events that he experienced and all of those things, but also having the finances and all the other supports behind it, et cetera, you can't possibly say that they're automatically going to know exactly what life is like for the other. But I think sometimes that feeds into the idea of, I'm checking your blind spot. I'm seeing some of the things that you may not have seen because of my own personal experience. And I'm willing to say it in a way that is not hurtful. I'm willing to say it in a way that definitely conveys a sense of concern and has the proper emotion behind it, but is not meant to be destructive. That is a very fine line with someone, and they have managed to create an art out of it. And that's part of why we enjoy their interactions so much.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So let's shift gears, but keep it in the family in a way. And let's talk about Bruce and Barbara Gordon. Now, this relationship changes depending on the universe, the medium. It tends to vary, but there often, I'll say most of the time, is a mentor-mentee relationship. Having said that, I feel like Bruce protects Barbara in a way that he doesn't always show the same level of protection to the Robins. And I'm not sure if that's because of any inherent sexism, that she's a woman, or because she's Jim's daughter.
So I'm going to even bring up another point to that. Are we talking about Batgirl or are we talking about Oracle?
Also, an excellent point. I'm thinking more, I think of Barbara as Batgirl. I know a lot of folks, when they think of Barbara Gordon, they envision her as Oracle. And then I also know that within the Babs fandom, there's a bit of a headbutting over that distinction over whether she's Batgirl or Oracle. I'm of an age where, I grew up watching the Batman 66 show.
Right.
So I think of Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. But
Right.
so I'll say it with regards to that.
Okay.
And now having said that, well, I'll let you talk about Barbara as Batgirl first, because I think Oracle carries with it a whole other set of.
Oh yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure I brought it up, because and for anyone listening live on the stream, yeah, this really is me just bringing that up in the moment, because I did not have this thought until maybe 40 seconds ago. So, okay, Barbara as Batgirl, as another potential protege. That's fair, and we've seen that. We have seen it with the Robins, and everyone is unique. I'm not trying to just throw her in with the exact same uh, category as them, but I will say this: you mentioned it, and I wouldn't necessarily call it misogynistic intentionally, but we also have to remember the era that this was written, and therefore there is going to be a certain hint of that. But let's go ahead and put part of a positive spin on it with empowerment, because the way Barbara has approached things, she has pretty much made it clear her job was to do things herself. She wanted to know, what can I do to help a particular situation, but not, how may I assist you, sir? There's a difference there. So when you approach it that way, it definitely creates something awkward with Bruce, only because at this point he has had much more consistent interactions with the men in his life. I'm not saying that chauvinistically either. I'm just pointing out the obvious in terms of the number of contacts as opposed to being with Barbara. But the idea now that you are, let's just call it what it is, you're intentionally obscuring part of another person's situation from someone that you also hold a unique relationship with. That is something that you take it out of the comic book world, and that's not exactly something we usually encourage. Uh, the first thing that comes to mind for many people is cheating. If you're cheating on someone with another person that the other person knows, I mean, that's how some murders happen. You can't, you've got to be really careful with this. And I'm not pretending to say that I know how, if he had found out in the moment, how Commissioner Gordon would react to it, but the fact that they go this far for so long tells me that there's something that they're not comfortable about. And this is where I get my own speculation. And if you want an example, I know we're going off comic with this, I apologize, but there's a great animated series episode where Barbara, it turns out, spoiler alert, she's actually having a dream in the hospital, but basically it's because it seemed like she just died landing on the hood of Commissioner Gordon's car, and he loses it. And that sounds like a potential real human reaction. And yet when she comes out of this nightmare, and she tries at some point to even have the conversation, maybe to breach the subject, her father shuts her down and basically says, "Hey, you're an adult. You're making the best decisions you can, and no matter what, I fully support you," and gives a wink. So it was a great episode, and I apologize that it's off comic, but my point is both of those are real. Both of those make sense. But there's a level of ambiguity between Barbara and Bruce that they don't want to tempt fate. And when you do that, you're creating tension, you're creating anxiety, and that is always going to be there. It doesn't just go away. It may fade over time because it may not be talked about all the time, but it's not like it doesn't exist. And when you have a relationship with that underlying tension, unfortunately, that means that at any point it can snap. That I'm not claiming that that's what would happen or anything, but I'm saying the potential, the fact that that is always there is something that's, going to at some point lead to increased emotional responses if we're talking about us in our lives. So I just wanted to make that parallel. Other than that, if you're talking about someone that was willing to learn, if you're talking about someone that clearly had talent, and you're talking about someone that was willing to dedicate much of her life to the cause that she believed in, then I think they were simpatico. I think that her and Bruce, go very well together. I have nothing negative to say about that. And her independent streak works very well, making sure that she's not under the thumb of someone like Bruce. So I think those are wonderful things.
Very well said. Now, if we're talking about Barbara as Oracle, I think that is very different, because as Oracle, I think there's this underlying guilt that Bruce carries because of what happened to Barbara, that he blames himself for letting the Joker shoot her and paralyze her, even though she is still incredibly gifted and does a fantastic job as Oracle. And I think the way, even if I'm one of those people who thinks that the original act of shooting her was not the best move, the idea to turn her into Oracle, I think, was making lemonade out of lemons. Almost that's making lemon meringue pie out of lemons. And I'm not even a lemon fan. My wife is, but that's a whole other story. The point is, the analogy is getting away from me. I apologize. The point is, Oracle is such an amazing character, but Bruce still, in spite of all of that, beats himself up, I think, inside every time he sees her in the chair.
Yeah.
And that's never going to go away.
Right. This is an example, not just for that particular situation, but for many situations where the question is, how do I make things even? How do I make things right? And there are many circumstances in society today where that type of question comes up. And the usual responses to that are either, you will never live this down, or you don't have to live this down. It's in the past. We can move forward. The idea that things will ever, quote unquote, be fixed or even or anything, it's all a fallacy. And it's unfortunate that both of them have to have some level of suffering involved with this. Of course, Barbara has the trauma of the event and the subsequent physical limitations, but clearly manages to adapt despite that level of physical disability to continue to expand the other areas of her life to make sure she is continuing to enjoy her life and being productive and doing everything that anyone would expect a person to do under the circumstance. And I think it's a wonderful example of what to do when, as you said, life hands you lemons and you make a lemon icy out of it. Anyway, if you're gonna make random analogies, I'm gonna do it too.
Fair enough.
But also, I would say that with Bruce, you mentioned the guilt. The guilt of omission can be just as painful as the guilt of commission. Of course, he didn't pull the trigger. He clearly was still trying to do his best in, for anyone, what would be considered unexpected circumstances. But this is an example of how an outcome overwhelms the process. In reality, is there anything other than being completely prescient to prevent that? No. And yet, the fact that something negative happened and caused a negative emotional response within him is indelible. So now we're talking about the coping mechanisms for that type of thing. And the real term for what we're talking about right now is undoing. How do I just, go back in time or something, or just, have that magic eraser and fix it, whatever. And since it doesn't exist, it depends on how hard a person is going to try that approach. And I've definitely read versions of Batman that have looked at it that way or spoken about it that way. But I've also read other versions where he has his moment of thinking about it, but then is able to process the idea that if her life has gone on, then so should mine. The thing, of course, that happens is when you have interactions with that person from that point forward, how does it remind you of it? And the reason I say it this way is, especially something as visceral as what happened with Barbara, it's one thing to have a phone conversation with someone like that. It's another thing to have that person in like, I'll just go ahead and say it, when they're wheeling in front of you, when they're not standing anymore, and you physically see it, when you visually get that sense. And that's a different situation. That stimulus is different. And there's no way to just automatically say to a person, oh, well, you could just turn that off. You can dampen it, but that doesn't mean it immediately goes away. And I was going to say unfortunately, but I wouldn't say it's fortunate or unfortunate. It just is. We will have to always process our emotion in the moment that it happens. We can't guarantee that it won't happen again. So that's true for each time Bruce has an interaction with Barbara as Oracle. When you look at it that way, and of course the other way around too, because let's be honest, it's very possible that there can be feelings for Barbara of a what if. Maybe not as intense because of the way it was written. Like, it's very clear that Bruce wouldn't have wanted this to happen to her, so she's not thinking that. But also the idea of, I had Batman on my side. How many times has Batman saved someone? And I'm one of the ones that got away. So there can be a part of that too. But it's not shown nearly as often, or not portrayed nearly as often as far as I recall. And we have very smart and knowledgeable fans, so I'm sure I'll get corrected on it. But I'm just saying, the general feel of what I've gotten from those stories is that Barbara has done an excellent job with her ability to move forward, and Bruce, because of the visceral nature of it from his standpoint in terms of processing that, what for him is new stimuli. He wasn't initially there. So ironically, that intensifies the fact that each time is new.
Yeah. And that situation of having to relive the trauma is something that I don't know that we've talked about too many times on the show, because I'm not certain how many characters that has been relevant to, but it's definitely something that, like I said, comes to mind when you think about Bruce and Oracle. And of course, Bruce is going to do his typical thing where he swallows it down and denies whatever, but it does eat at him. And some of the stories over the years have referenced that. I can't recall them off the top of my head because, again, it's impossible to be a Batman completionist. Side note, by the way, if you see on the notes, I added another very important relationship.
Ooh.
Yeah. Let's sit on that one just for a little bit. So the next one I want to talk about is along those similar professional lines, but Batman and Lucius Fox. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most people's idea of Lucius Fox is Morgan Freeman from the Nolan trilogy, because, and this isn't a slight, he's not in that many stories. He doesn't play a huge role. His primary focus is anything involving Wayne Corp or Wayne Tech or the Wayne company. So that's where his role tends to be. But there is the undercurrent that he is at least familiar with, if not completely aware of, Bruce Wayne's nighttime activities. And that gives him a unique spot amongst Bruce's relationships, because almost none of the characters we've spoken about have anything to do with Wayne Corp. They're all Batman or Bruce Wayne as an individual. Lucius Fox is one of, if not the only character I can think of that walks those two worlds, and that makes for an interesting dynamic as well.
Yeah, I love the flow of this episode because we go from a professional in quote unquote crime fighting, dealing with Batman and knowing him as that, to the thing that we usually talk about on a regular basis, a character that knows Bruce Wayne and Batman, but in that pure vein of what we think about as the all-encompassing Bruce and Batman together. Now we have this corporate professional side, this window that gets pushed aside. And yet, let's be blunt, I'm sure that Batman would still have many of the things that he's capable of. And as a matter of fact, a recent run has been exploring this about if you took away the money, what would he be? And the answer is still Batman. But clearly, a lot of it has to do with having that marketplace front, basically, to bankroll whatever is necessary, and to have someone that is trustworthy enough, because there's been plenty of storylines that involve people somehow either infiltrating Wayne Corp or trying takeovers or just messing with the business, and someone like Lucius Fox being there has been incredibly helpful because he's absolutely steadfast. And the way that it's portrayed in general is that Bruce Wayne is a capable person, but clearly it's not his number one thing in his life. And there are many people in business where that's true. I don't want to make it sound like that's a negative. It's just, once again, the way it's presented. And if that's the case, someone really does need to be way more focused on those things. And Lucius fills that role. Imagine what would happen, though, if Lucius were the type of boss, or the type of, because technically he can't be his boss, but he definitely ranks high enough that he would listen somewhat to him to start putting some put the screws to him and basically say, hey, instead of doing whatever it is that you're doing in off hours, we really need you to review some of these quarterly reports. Can you do me a favor? Can you actually, take a look at our last P&L statement and tell me where this, these $3 million for surplus, it says mechanic expenses. What is that? You don't need to know it's a Batmobile. Just imagine, though, if he decided that he was going to make it not just professional, but he was going to make it the ultra tight, just work comes first and everything else in life comes second type of situation. We don't have that circumstance. Either Lucius gets fired, or honestly, because he probably still will want some access to it, because Bruce is not stupid, he'd probably kind of say like, all right, but yeah, I'm gonna have to step away for a little bit, and actually I may just have to sever ties, and we might end up with a much more fragmented system. So there's a lot of ways where what I'm getting at is he could have been a hard ass, and he wasn't. And part of it has to do with Bruce's father. He was not new to the company. He's been around for a long, long time, and he's seen the development. He basically was put in charge of that development. And when Bruce was in, I'm sure the way it was presented was he was gallivanting, but when in reality, we know he was actually doing some pretty hardcore training and going through his own experiences all over the world and doing all sorts of other stuff. He could have just said, all right, this is another young punk that doesn't get the realities of life, and I'm going to do my best to push him out. And yet their relationship is incredibly civil, if not cordial, basically saying, I'm going to allow you to live life on your terms as long as you're showing me that you're doing it from a good place. Even with the suspicion that maybe it's beyond a good place. It's a very dark place. And the fact that he is comfortable enough with his position in such a spot tells me that he has a level of maturity and perhaps even wisdom that can only be rivaled, dare I say, by someone like Alfred, who's shown that. It's just from a completely different angle. And he doesn't even need to press on whether or not he needs to be more involved in it. The idea that you may or may not have something going on in the background and you're willing to let it ride out because you have, once again, here's that word again, a level of trust in the people involved that you're willing to delegate. Let's call this the nighttime delegation. This is the night shift. And you're willing to delegate and not micromanage and recognize that you have instilled at least that certain level of confidence, or they have the confidence in you as well, that they don't just automatically come to you for every single little thing. That is amazing. That is powerful. And for those of you out there that work with people, you know what I'm talking about. It's something to really aim for. When you have a workforce, whether you're on the top or you're in the middle or you're on the bottom, whatever it is, when you have a workforce that recognizes that we all have a job to do, we're in it together, and we're gonna check on each other. We're gonna make sure that we're each doing what we're supposed to, but we're not going to get so nitpicky that we're going to start making our lives miserable together. That's a pretty good way to be.
I work for the state. I wouldn't know anything about that. Just keeping it real. Now, it's funny that you're talking about trust, because I think the next relationship that we're going to discuss is absolutely 1000% based on trust, but it's very fascinating how they got there. And also, we're spending most of this time talking about Batman, who's a character that we've never done before, and his relationship with all these other characters that we've never done before. Here's another character that we haven't done, and I think it's another situation where we might need a month, we might need several months to cover: Batman and Superman.
Oh dear.
I mean, the essays that have been written about how these two are opposites, how they're two sides of the same coin, this, that, or the other. I mean, I think you could spend a copious amount of time just researching and reading about their compare and contrast. But it ultimately comes down to the fact that they have very different views of how to accomplish the same goals, and yet they still are willing to work together. And I think some of the most beautiful stories are about how Bruce acknowledges that Clark is what he wishes he could be in some respects. And Superman understands Bruce's trauma and loves him because of, not in spite of it.
I'm a little speechless because, once again, to get into how the sausage gets made, Anthony threw this one in while we were recording, which is fine because I know we do this anyway. But this one is the thing that, I'll be really honest here, is what kept me reading comics at a time where I was considering just totally letting it go. There were so many Elseworlds kinds of stories that involved Batman and Superman, and they just seem to have the same undercurrent, the same essence that permeated, and it was wonderful for me because it let me know that I'm not the only one that thought of these characters in this way. That many people, dare I say, most people think of these characters in this way in terms of the dichotomy. Small town living, very wholesome, loving parents that are around the whole time, wanting to make sure that things are for the best and showing the goodness of the world, and finding out when you have incredible powers and the ability to do just about anything, and knowing that you're not going to squander it and instead make the world an even better place, as opposed to having what in theory could be a very similar start in life, including the finances that the other person didn't have, but to have a lot of the intimacy of having those parents ripped away from you, to be in the big city lights and have a certain level of expectation and responsibility that's going to be coming up even as you're growing up and knowing it. And therefore having to find a way to deal with that trauma to the point that you dedicate your life to eradicating the wrongs of what's going on in what you consider to be an unfair world. I've done this before in other episodes, so I'm not going to hash it out all over again. But on one hand, having someone thinking that, what am I supposed to do with this naive rube that isn't even of our planet? And making sure that if he sneezes wrong, let alone have the wrong thought, we're all doomed and I have to be prepared for it. As opposed to, what do I do with this misguided vigilante that really, really just lays into people and is so incredibly hard on everyone around him, and feels like even the most insignificant slight is just more motivation to prove himself, and just goes deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole that he will never climb out of. Ironically, I know it was shown already in terms of it being a conflict and intense battles on several occasions, but there's a different way to look at it. And I think for our show, this is the part that is absolutely stunning when you actually say this. Both of them are saying, I want to help that man. I want to make sure that whatever is happening, because they are putting their heart and soul into it, that it turns out as good as it can. Because if it does, then we're all going to be better for it, and it's something special. When you frame it that way, all of a sudden, it's not nearly as adversarial. When you recognize that Clark is willing to ask Bruce on things because he knows that he's dealing with one of the most intelligent minds in existence, and when Bruce just kind of, in a monotone, melancholy fashion, just kind of says, well, I guess this one is up to Superman. He actually does it because he recognizes, thank goodness I have this ultimate secret weapon on my side. When they do that, you're right that it's 1,000% about trust. But, and this may sound too sappy, and I'm sorry, but doggone it, that's the way I view it. That's about the type of love that we as sentient beings can have for one another. That we can just take all the details and literally just put them on the margins and bring that commonality home. When you do that with any person, and you're willing to throw away, I'm serious about this, when you're willing to throw away all the other things that you wonder makes them different, you end up with an emotional experience that allows us all to recognize that we're the same. And if you haven't had that experience, then I really hope someday you do, because it truly is one of the greatest things you can feel in our lifetimes.
And that's why you're the Superman to my Batman.
You know, it's fascinating that you say that, because your idealism, I feel, is much more on the Superman side as opposed to my dark and brooding. And that's the way I've always viewed it. So for you to say that, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I thought it was the opposite.
Well, I say that only because I didn't want to go so far as to say that I'm the Superman of the duo. But I think it's telling that we each think of the other as the Superman and that we're the Batman.
Well, I think, and I think we're going to get into this in the round table. Let's be real. Let's be real. If you're in the throes of, let's say, athletic competition, things like that, most people will say they consider themselves, or they want to feel like Superman. But when you're talking about like one-on-one, just standard human interactions or other situations, many more people, and I don't have the numbers on this, many more people, deep down, they want to be Batman.
Well, that goes back to that meme of, be yourself, always be yourself, unless you can be Batman, then be Batman.
Yep.
I don't want to be Batman. I want to be Captain America. I'll rephrase that. I don't want to be Batman. I want to be Moon Knight. But so we've spent all this time talking about relationships with characters that have a helpful bent on Batman in some fashion, one way or another, and a positive relationship. We're going to jam on the brakes and do a complete 180 now, because this relationship is not only not helpful in any way, shape, or form, but is also the only one that we've discussed the character, but we didn't fully get into the nature of the relationship in the episode. And that, of course, is his arch nemesis, the clown prince of crime, the Joker. We did discuss the Joker's obsession with Batman in that episode, which was our second episode, so it's 3 years. But what does Bruce get out of the relationship? What is Batman's take? Because we understand the Joker's obsession with Batman, and we talked about this in the Joker episode, and I thought it was done very well in the Dark Knight movie of Heath Ledger's Joker saying, no, we need each other. We're destined to do this forever.
Well, I'll jump in and I'll say, honestly, with Jack Nicholson's Joker, well, he didn't say it, but the point is, actually, they both said it. He said, "You made me." And the response was, "I made you. You made me first." I mean, there are so many ways that this has been brought up. Oh boy. Okay. We're going to look at this from Bruce's side then. It's because the Joker is the ultimate canvas and he gets to paint in every possible way. He brings chaos. Batman has the opportunity to restore order. He brings destruction. Batman gets to rebuild. He brings absolute murder, violence, and Batman repeatedly shows him that there is a way to go through life without wanting to kill, including him. This is the ultimate situation where someone just keeps setting up the pins and he keeps knocking them down. He doesn't have to create other goals. You could set these two up just one-on-one together forever. And that's the whole point. It's fascinating because isn't that what, oh boy, this is going to sound perverse. Isn't that what so many of our relationships should be? The idea that you're going to have variations and adaptations, but you know fully well that you're going to continue to be tied hopefully for the rest of your life till each of your last dying breaths, and it's going to be worth it. The problem, of course, is that the Joker is affecting so many people in negative ways and just doing such harm. And Batman, by not ending him or at least finding a way to contain him permanently, is somewhat complicit in theory, continuing that harm. And yet he has to balance that out with the idea that if he ever decides that he's going to end it, and there is an Elseworld story with that, which also includes Batman being a vampire, I'm not going to get into that, where if he goes down that road, then unfortunately that means that breaking his tenets so directly and so discreetly after so many years of saying no, then it sets him up to say that he can break any tenet at any time. And we don't want that. So it's interesting. It's a path that he's decided to take, and it has such intense guardrails that that's dedication to just continue to say that I know that this person is so important that I will always interact with them, even when it's painful, even when it's negative. That's a level of obsession. I know we talked about Joker's obsession. I don't even know if you want to call it obsession. That's a level of, and this is where we get into the preparation, the planning, all of those things. The idea of why would he worry about every single Black Swan event that's ever going to happen in mankind's history? It's because he knows that it may not be that far away in just one man. That's above and beyond what most of us deal with on a regular basis. I may wonder if I'm going to get an off-the-wall patient that's going to test my limits. I suppose that happens once in a while. To have it as essentially a guarantee, I'll be honest, I don't know exactly how I would handle that. So for him to essentially take almost always the exact opposite emotional trait that the Joker is showing, with a few rare exceptions, tells me that his point is to make sure it's very clear to anyone else observing on the outside that they're not the same. And yet, he still counts him as a human being. He's still willing to give that opportunity, still willing to give that chance. The idea that a reformation at some point may happen. That's above and beyond what most people would consider. That's above and beyond, to be honest, what I think I would consider. So to try and match that person's intensity, to try and counter that person's obsession, and still try and show them the grace, son, that you are willing to bestow to any human being you ever interact with, that's special. That is special. That's unique to that character. That's one of a kind. And I don't know how I'm supposed to say as a psychiatrist how a person's willing to do that or how they do it. I just give credit.
Yeah, it does say a lot about Bruce that even when dealing with the Joker, he will not break that one rule. Even though you know that of all the characters, all the members of his rogues gallery that he deals with, he may not be able to justify killing the Penguin. I don't know. You can't justify killing the Riddler. You can't justify killing Kite Man. Hell yeah. But the Joker, you know, you got to say at some point, he's got to die. But it says so much about Bruce that he says, I cannot be the person to decide just by myself that he has to die. Now, do I think that if the Joker gets the death penalty, that Bruce will stop it? I don't know. Because then it's not just Bruce making that call. But it's a lot of internal strength, a lot of, as Mick Foley would say, testicular fortitude to hold that line.
You know what? I'm going to change that to gonadal fortitude because, I don't know, testicular and ovarian fortitude. Just, I don't know. I don't like separating them out. So I'm just going to say gonadal fortitude and strife.
Wee. So I think this has been just a fun insight into some of the relationships. And we could go on for hours because Batman has interacted with so many characters, so many different people over the course of 80 plus years. And their impact on him and his impact on them. But we wanted to hit some of at least the main characters that we haven't already discussed and that would make for, an interesting dynamic and an interesting discussion. So there's no recommended reading. There's no treatment because it's not really an issue.
Wait, I got an idea. It's not a treatment, but it's something that I would be very interested in. We touched on the fact that these are so many different spheres, and I'll just automatically say exclude the Joker. Can we get a conference table or a conference call, if it's still age of COVID, with these other characters, with Bruce? Like, let's think about this. Like I said, or as you said, actually, you got the corporate side, you got the police side, you got the, once again, Bat family side. You got the other superhero, like external superhero side. Can you imagine all these people interacting and having their own round table about Bruce? I would love that. I would absolutely love that. The insights that they share with one another, how things are going. I think that would be absolutely amazing.
A Zoom meeting together to talk about Batman. Janine says, a Bat Zoom call. I think that's fascinating. I don't think you could live stream it like we're doing now. I think it would give too much away. I also think it would be, Zoom bombed potentially by a villain.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. What I'm describing is we got to get to work, Anthony. We gotta make sure that we have this written out for the next story arc.
Once again, we come up with another comic idea. DC, give us a call. Somebody at DC, give us a call. Somebody, please. Literally an email, a response to a tweet, something. Anybody? Not pointing fingers at anybody, just saying I've reached out to a number of creators and nobody's gotten back to me. But don't worry, I'm not bitter. So no recommended reading for this episode, but recommended listening would be go back and listen to the 12 Batman character episodes that we've done. Like I said, we've literally done all the Robins with the exception of Stephanie Brown. We did Alfred. We've done, I think, 7 Batman Rogues. So there's ample listening opportunities to hear us talk about people in the periphery of Bruce Wayne and Batman and how they interact with Bruce and how Bruce deals with them. So all of our website, all of our episodes are available on our website at capesonthecouch.com. And thanks to WordPress, now you can do a search for Robins because they're all categorized. So you can do a search for Robins, and you can do a search for Bat Family, and you can do a search for Batman Rogues, I believe. And they're categorized by episode. So go to capesonthecouch.com, and if you find one, it'll bring you to, the links to the rest. So upcoming episodes, we've got the Professional Roundtable, which we're very, very excited about, with Ben Stover from Popcorn Psychology, Dr. Goku from Guardians MH, and Dr. Travis Langley, who literally wrote the book on Batman and his mental issues. So that is coming up next episode. And then the Batman by the fans, so to speak, that episode where we asked you all to submit your voice messages, your comments, whatever, your memories of Batman, etc. We're in the process of compiling that and doing a sort of reaction to that. And then we've got a couple other things. Like I said, we're still hammering out some details, working on stuff, but we will. The last episode of the month is going to be something that is very, very special. It's going to take Doc and I a very long time to work on it, but it's going to absolutely be worth it. And we can't wait to bring it to you. Very excited. And so that's going to wrap it up. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Capes on the Couch. Please like and subscribe and interact with us. We're live streaming this on YouTube and our Facebook page. We've got our Patreon site, patreon.com/Capes on the Couch. You can go and subscribe and unlock additional content. You can also go to capesonthecouch.com/merch, and that will take you to our TeePublic site, where you can buy some cool swag with our logos on it, or the Why Because comics, which I know Janine has a shirt that she wears and has shared it in our Discord group as well. And you can join their Discord group. We've been having a wonderful discussion going on about WandaVision, which I believe by the time this episode airs might be like done or just about done. We've been having a wonderful discussion in the Discord about all of the Easter eggs and the characters and the goings on in Westview, New Jersey. And you can go back and listen to our WandaVision episode if you haven't already started the show. So Doc, anything you want to add before we head out?
At this point, no. I really am glad that we're finally doing this Bat-tacular. That's really what I want to focus on. So yeah, I'll do my best not to add too many puns, because this is serious business, and Batman can certainly be draining.
Why so serious?
Thank you. He picked up on it. That is so cool.
Of course I picked up on it. Why wouldn't I? Dude, we've been friends for 25 years. You can't throw me a layup like that and expect me not to dunk it.
You're the only one who thought that was a layup. A lot of people wouldn't have followed what I was trying to set up there.
I think that was pretty damn clear.
Okay.
But anyway, for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. All right, an hour 10. So figure, it'll be about an hour 5, hour and change once I do all the editing. So I don't know who else is still watching. I don't know if Janine, Matt, your sisters, because I saw Nisi like the one in the Facebook group.
Gotcha.
So, but anyway, we're gonna end the broadcast. So thank you all for watching, and hopefully we'll be live streaming next week. I just need to get approval from everybody else, and we'll see you around. So take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.